Hello everybody, in this video we will be covering AWS IAM. Now what does that stand for? Well, AWS stands for Amazon Web Services, and it provides you a bunch of different services that you can utilize to build and host your application. Now IAM stands for Identity Access Management, and I'll explain exactly what that is through a diagram. So let's go over here and let's say that I have a great startup idea. I talked to a bunch of investors. They gave me a bunch of money and I was able to hire these 5 engineers. So I was able to hire Jeff, Ed, Shelby, Sam, and Michelle. And we all went together and we started talking about the architecture of my wonderful idea. And we decided that we needed to utilize these 8 AWS services. Now, if you're taking this crash course, I do expect you to know a little bit about AWS. AWS has a bunch of different services that you can use. Obviously, when you're building an application, you're not going to use every single one. You're only going to pick the ones that you really need. Now, these are some of these services. You do not need to know what these services are or what they do to learn about IAM, but just understand that these are some of the Amazon services or AWS services that are supplied to us. So we need Lambda functions, we need RDS, we need CloudFront, we need DynamoDB, we need S3, we need Elastic Beanstalk, Lightsail, and EC2. So this is what we need. All right, terrific. So we went over this. We figured out that this is exactly what we need. We went over the architecture. Now we need to get access to these services. Now, because I am the owner and this is my company, what I need to do is to go to aws.com or aws.amazon.com and create an AWS account. So I would go ahead and create an AWS account. I would put in my information, and then I would also put in my credit card information because, of course, these are not free services. You have to pay to use them. And so eventually, once I do all that, I end up with a root account. And a root account can literally do anything. It has access to every single service, not just all these services. It can create users, delete users, etc., update users. It can do everything. Now, with IAM, it is best practice to never really use this root account, even though I might want to have access to everything. So what I can do instead is, hey, I can get this root account and then I can create what is known as an IAM user, or if you will, just another AWS account. Now, if I want to create another AWS account for me, I probably want to have access to everything. So what I can do is I can give myself administrative access using this root account. So I can create an account with administrative access. So I would just end up with an account. I would also have the root account, but I would end up with an account with admin access. Now, admin access has the exact same abilities as a root account, except the account that it has admin access is not able to delete the root account, but the root account is able to delete the account with the admin access. So I would just create this account over here. And now what I need to do is I need to, have my peers over here, or my coworkers, get access to these services. So, one thing I could do is just share this across share this password combination across every single person, but this is highly not recommended. Instead, what I can do is I can just create other accounts for them as well. And really what I could do is just give every single one admin access. So we can just give them all admin access, and you guys really know what I mean by this. So you can just give them all admin access, and they'll all be able to do the functionality that they need. However, this is not best practice. What instead we want to do is we want to figure out exactly what these individuals need and then give them the absolute least ability that they need to have to perform their job. So what we can do is we can actually group these individuals into exactly what they do. So over here, these guys are data engineers. So these are data engineers. And so we can group them together in a data engineer section. And over here, we can then just give them access to the services that they need. So let's say all of the data engineers, they just need access to RDS, DynamoDB, and S3. So these are the only 3 things that they need access to. They don't need access to Lightsail, they don't need access to EC2, they don't need access to Elastic Beanstalk, etc. So they just need access to these 3. Well, we're going to group them together and then give them access to these 3. Now over here, we can also group this into DevOps, and they're going to need access to Lightsail, EC2, CloudFront, and Lambda. And that's exactly what we can do. We can go ahead and we can just group them together. And so once we group them together, what we can do is we can attach policies to that specific group. So let me kind of explain what I mean here. So we group them together, and what we can do is we can attach these policies, and I'll show you exactly what they are in the AWS console. But policies are essentially, you can think of them as permission. So we give these individuals or these groups policies, and then through those policies, we are giving them permission. So over here, you can see that this policy, for example, says S3 read write. So now all these individuals are able to access the S3 service and are able to read and write. But there's other things that we might also be able to do with S3, such as list all of the things that are in S3. However, within this policy, we've specified that they can't do that, so they don't have permission to do that. They don't have permission to list them. Again, if this doesn't make a lot of sense, do not worry. We will cover it in the console in a bit. But yeah, so we attach policies to this group, and now Jeff, Ed, and Shelby can read and write from S3. Also over here, what we can do is we can say another policy, EC2 full access. So over here, you can say, okay, well, Sam and Michelle, they have access to EC2 and they can do anything within it because it's full access. And of course, within these policies, we can attach multiple policies, of course. So we can say, okay, well, you have S3, you have an S3 policy. You're also going to have a DynamoDB policy and an RDS policy. And we're going to attach that to this group. And so each one of these individuals is able to access RDS, DynamoDB, and S3. However, if Jeff tried to access EC2, they would not be able to. And again, this is the best practice. You want to give them the least amount of privilege that they need to perform their job. If later on that they need more access, that's not a problem. We can just give that to them. We can add more policies. Now, one thing that I want to quickly note is that an individual can fall into multiple groups. For example, let's say that Shelby is a very, very smart individual and it's costing me $200,000 a year just because she's so incredibly smart. And she is not only really a data engineer, she's also a DevOps engineer. And to be able to help out Sam and Michelle, she needs to have access to all of the DevOps things. So she needs to have access to EC2, Lightsail, Lambda, and CloudFront. But she also needs to have access to, well, because she's a data engineer, to S3, DynamoDB, and RDS. Not a problem. An individual can be a part of multiple groups. So Shelby can be a part of the data engineer group as well as the DevOps group. And because of that, she is going to inherit this policy as well as this policy. And thus she is going to have the permission to access essentially all of these services. Now, there's also a bunch of other services that we don't use in AWS that I haven't listed here, and she would not have access to that because we're not using it. We don't need to give her permission. But yeah, just to quickly note that we can have an individual with multiple or attached to multiple groups. Okay, so that is enough of the theory. I hope that made a lot of sense. And now now what we're going to do is we're going to go into AWS, sign into our console. I do expect you to have a root account. So sign into your root account, go into the console, and then we're going to start playing around with IAM. Okay, so I am now logged into my root account. And now what I can do is I can access the IAM service to create a bunch of other accounts. Now, one thing that I also want to quickly note that is special to IAM is that it's not region specific. It is actually a global service. Just to quickly illustrate what that means, let me just go to the EC2 service right over here. And you can see that I can select multiple regions to launch my EC2 instance in. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. So you can see here, my default is US East Ohio, but I can pick whatever I want. I can pick Mumbai, I can pick Central Canada, I can pick Europe, I can pick whatever it is that I want. Now, if I go to the IAM service, and over here you can go to the IAM service by clicking on service and then scrolling down to IAM, or you can just search for IAM right over here and you should see that service. This is a global service. So this is a global service. You can see you can't pick any region. So it's not required for you to select a region. Now, before we dive into this, let me just quickly illustrate how important it is to protect your root account. So as soon as you sign up, I highly recommend that you go to over here. So you go over here to your username and then go to my security credentials. And then what I want you to do is set up multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication, if you don't know what that is, it's instead of just supplying your password to log into your AWS account, you would supply your password as well as some sort of code that you would get from a physical device that is near you. So if you ever used Google Authenticator or Authy, or I think Microsoft also has one, well, you can utilize those to increase the security and increase how difficult it would be to actually get access to your root account. So you can see here, just go over here and select virtual multi-factor device. And so this could be your phone or your computer. You would just click continue. And then what you would do is with your phone, you would just go into that app like Google Auth, and you would just scan this code over here. And what this will do is will supply you with 2 pieces of code, and you would add them in, and then you would assign this to this multi-factor authentication to your root account. I'm not going to do that, but I highly suggest that you do that for your account. Okay, cool. So now let's just get into IAM. All right. So IAM, let's click on that. All right, so here we are in the IAM dashboard, and you can see that we have a lot of different things that we talked about already. So we have user groups, which remember, like this is a group right here. Data engineer is a group, DevOps is a group. We also have the users themselves, so that's Jeff, Ed, Shelby, etc. We also have roles, and we also talked about policies. Remember, policies is what gives those users permissions. So let's actually just go ahead and let's just begin with, remember, we have a root account right now. We really never want to use this. So let's just go ahead and let's create an account for myself with admin access. So how do we go about doing that? Well, let's just go to users. So we're going to go to users. And we're going to, and let me just zoom out a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to add a user. So we're going to add a user. Very, very easy. And then I'm going to call this user Laith. And over here, you can see we have 2 options. We have programmatic access. So does this user have programmatic access, or do they have console access? So when you're dealing with like real human beings and you want to give them access to AWS, you're going to give them a console access. Console access basically means that they have access to this dashboard, to this website. Programmatic access is when you want some sort of third party like a CLI or an SDK or an API to have access to your AWS account and for it to start performing some actions to your AWS account. For example, let me just quickly search this up. Serverless. So right here we have the serverless framework. And what the serverless framework does is it builds your serverless architecture for you in AWS. So you can utilize the programmatic access. So what you would do is you would get programmatic access, give that to serverless, and then serverless would programmatically add Lambda functions, etc. So that is programmatic access. But when we're dealing with real human beings, we are going to give them console access. Now we could also give them both. And so what we can do is we can also get the access key and the secret access key. And this would be kind of like the username and the password for something like this. Or you can just have a username and a password. Or you can have both again. But we're just going to do console access. And now what we can do is we can say, we can give them we can create a custom password for them, or what we can do is we can just auto generate a password. That is what I will do. And we will also require a password reset. So once they log into their account for the first time, we would require them to reset their password. And you can see here, let me just zoom in, you can see here that it says user automatically gets the IAM user change password policy, which will allow them to change their own passwords. You can see that this is a policy that they get, which gives them the permission to change their own password. All right, so now let's just go here and say next permissions. And this is this is where we give them permissions. So what we can do is we can either place this user inside of a group and attach the policies, thus the permissions, to that group, or we can just give the policies directly to the user. It's highly recommended to always put an individual inside of a group and attach the policies to that group. So what we can do is we can just create a group, or we can of course copy permissions from an existing user. We're not going to do that because we have no users. Or we can go over here, attach existing policies directly. That's also not what we're going to do. So we're going to go over here, we're going to create a group, and we're going to call this admin. And now what we need to do is we need to attach policies to this group. And you can see here there's a bunch of different policies. So you can see here we have Amazon EC2, so Amazon full, so this is registry full access, DynamoDB read-only access, etc. Now for me, I want to have administrative access. So this is kind of like the root account. I have access to absolutely everything. And this is the policy that I want to attach to the admin group. So I can create this group now. So I have created this group. And now what I can do is I can go to next. So over here, so I created the group, and not only did I create the group, I also attached myself, or that user that I was creating, to this group. And now I can go to next. Now what I can do is I can also add tags. They're just key value pairs that allow you to get more information, or just tag user information within that. So you can have their email, their job description. So I can say something like, I don't know, description admin or whatever. Maybe Shelby would be, I don't know, department DevOps or data engineer. So we can add that in there. I won't, but you can if you want to. And then over here, it just gives you a kind of a quick summary. Just, hey, are you sure this is the username, blah, blah, blah. So it's just a way for you to review everything. Once you're happy with it, you will just click on create user. And there we go. We have successfully created our user. Now, how do you log into this? Well, if you were to log into this, what you would need to do is give the individual, or I guess yourself, this URL over here, as well as their username, which is Lath, and as well as their password. Now, one thing that I quickly want to note, this password I will delete, of course. So I'm going to show it to you guys, but I will delete it, so it's not going to really mean anything to you. But this password, you're never going to see it again. So what I highly suggest is store this password in a very, very secure place. And actually what's going to happen is you're going to require a password reset anyways, but you're never able to recover your AWS account. You're never going to see this password again. So you can either just download the SVG, store it somewhere else, or you can store this somewhere very secure. But I highly suggest store it somewhere very, very secure. All right, so now what we can do is we can essentially go to this URL. So you would give yourself or the person that you created the account for this URL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up on Safari. So I'm going to open this up on Safari. The reason why I'm going to do this is because I don't have any cookies or anything in memory or stored within my browser. So it's kind of a fresh slate. You can also, if you want to use Chrome, just open it up on incognito. I'm just going to open up on Safari. Maybe later on I'll also do incognito. But now what we can do is you go to this URL over here. And so you would say, okay, here's the URL. And then they would just say their username, and then their password would be this. Now, just to prove to you that this password is useless to you guys, it's asking me to change the password. So let me just quickly change the password. to this. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and change this password. And now, there we go. Now I have, well, admin access. So now I created an IAM user. So you can see I have all of these services. I have all access to them. Not a problem. All right, terrific. So now let's go ahead and let's create Shelby. So let's create an account for Shelby. And remember, Shelby is within the data engineers. So she's a data engineer. And so let me just quickly log out of my account over here. If I know how to log out, it will sign out. So I'm going to sign out. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an account for Shelby. And remember, Shelby, we only want to give her RDS, DynamoDB, and S3 access. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go to back to IAM. You can either do this in our root account or even in our admin account. But I'm just going to do it in my root account, whatever, just for this demonstration. Highly suggest probably just do it in your admin account, which is better. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to create another user. Probably you guys get this by now. And we're going to say Shelby. So Shelby is the new user or add user. And we're going to say Shelby. And we can also add multiple users in if we want to at the same time. We're going to give Shelby a console access. We're going to allow her to, we're going to auto-generate, ask her to update it. And now what we want to do is we want to give her access to, these three. Remember, these three. So let's just go ahead and let's create a group. And we're going to call this group Data Engineer. I always misspell engineer. Let's actually just do dash engineer. So over here we have data, underscore engineer, looks better. And now what we want to do is we don't want to give her access to everything. We want to just give her access to what she needs. So we can say RDS, and we can also say, okay, so this is RDS full access. Now this might be too powerful. We might not want to give her full access. So I'll show you a way to kind of customize exactly what you want in a bit. But for now, let's just say she'll be very smart. We want to give her full access. We want to give DynamoDB. You can see that there's some existing policies here. DynamoDB full access, read only. So there's a bunch of different things. So we're going to give her this over here. And now let's say for S3, we don't want to give her absolutely everything. So what we want to do is we want to kind of limit the access she has for S3. So what we can do is we can kind of fine tune what we want from the existing policies, or what we can do is we can just create a policy. So let's go over here, and what we can do is create this policy. So when we create this policy, you can see here that we can do it in two different forms. I prefer the visual editor, or you can use just a JSON blob. I'm not going to cover the JSON blob because I honestly prefer the visual editor. So over here, what we can do is we can just select a service. So the service that we want is S3. Let's just click on S3. So this is the service that we want. And then we also want over here, you can see all of the actions that, or all of the access level. So what we can do is we can just give her access to everything. Or, well, there's not really a point of that. We want to fine tune what we want. So maybe we want her to be able to list everything in S3. Maybe we want her to be able to read everything, but maybe we don't want her to tag. And maybe we don't want to let her write something. So you can see here, okay, write, but then we have 89 that were selected. And so maybe we don't want her to delete objects. We don't want her to perform any of the delete functionality. So we can actually get rid of this. So over here, we're allowing her to create, we're allowing her to update, but we're not allowing her to delete. So you can see we're really fine tuning our policy. Okay, cool. And now what we need to do is we need to specify the resources. And so over here, I'm going to say all resources. And then what we can do is we can just say next tags. So over here, next tags. No, thank you. I'm not going to provide any tags. Then over here, review. Let's just give this policy, I don't know, S3, I don't know, data engineer, whatever. You guys probably can think of a better name. You can give it a description. I'm too lazy to do that. And now what we can do is we can create this policy. So we have created this policy. Wonderful. So you can see here that it's a little bit different. So it's not like the typical AWS policy. This is a very fine-tuned policy. And now what we can do is we can go back over here and let's just refresh. And now we should see, if we were to refresh, we should see this policy over here. So we're going to attach this policy to the data engineer group as well. So let's go ahead and let us create this group. And so now we can just give Shelby access to the data engineer group. So let's do a next tag and then next review. And then, yeah, so she's part of this group. If you want, you can just click on the group, right click on the group to see the group itself and all the permissions that it has. So you can see your permissions and it has all these policies over here. And so now we can just create the user. And so I would just give Shelby this URL. She would go to her browser, enter it, and then she would write her username as well as her password. And then of course she would save this somewhere and then she would put her old password. Let me just put in a password here. I'm just like literally making up a password as we go so that just more security for myself. Damn it, it doesn't match. All right, maybe you can just pick a simpler password. There we go. There we go. Okay, terrific. So now she has her AWS account. Now, if she were to go to RDS, this is taking some time. Sometimes I'm not sure why Safari is kind of slow, but you can see here she can do whatever it is that she wants with RDS. She can see all of the instances if she wants to, or actually I didn't give her access to that stuff. Unfortunately, I guess not. I guess maybe I didn't give her access to that. But DynamoDB, she should also have access to DynamoDB. Did I give her access to RDS? I thought I did. RDS data. Okay, that's probably it. Yeah, what I probably meant was just RDS. But let's just go over here. You can see here she has access. She can create a table. She can do whatever it is that she wants. Now, if she were to go to Lambda, however, you can see, hey, you're not authorized for Lambda. If she were to go to EC2, we're gonna get the same message. You're not authorized to do any of this stuff. So you can't see any of the running instances. You're not authorized to do this. You're not authorized. Now, if she were to go to S3, you can see here that. So let me just zoom in. You can see that, okay, well, we have a bunch of different S3 buckets, and she's able to see them. Now, let's say that Shelby, I demoted her, and I want to give her less access. What I could do is I can go to the S3 policy. So I can go to the S3 policy, and I can change the policy. Just to show you how this looks like from a JSON blob, this is how it would look like. So you can see here that we have the version, which is kind of an ID, and then this is the ID of the statement. And over here, we're allowing these actions on these resources. So S3 a get object and all these kind of permissions on every single resource out there. But yeah, so that's how that looks like. But now let's just quickly go back to the policy summary, and let's go over here to S3, and we want to edit the policy. So what we can do is, let's say that what we want to do at this point is go over here to actions, and we don't want to give her list access. So now what we can do is we can just review the policy, save the changes, and if Shelby were to go back over here and we were to refresh this page, I wonder if there's a refresh option here. I guess not. Let's just refresh the page. You can see that now she doesn't have access to the list. And that right there is the summary of IAM. IAM allows you to create accounts and give them specific permissions to specific services. So really all you really need to know is users, user groups, and policies. Those are kind of the main concepts of IAM. Now again, also if you're using something like serverless framework that needs access to your accounts, you're gonna have to need to give them programmatic permission, which gives them some sort of access key and an access secret, which serves as a username and a password. All right, hopefully you guys found that informative, and I'll see you guys in the next one.